package.
And
Ryan looks like he reads a lot.
Hey, we're live. What's up, people? People coming to watch. This is the interview with Per Bylund. We're waiting for him to come in right now, and we'll just be chilling.
Looks like he reads a lot. Ah, thanks. So glad I can hear that. Primer we needed. Franz Oppenheimer's classic, The State.
The State is a classic.
Oh, you read it? You read it?
No, I mean, just The State is so...
You're not a fan?
No, I like his work.
I'm a pretty big fan of The State.
4K.
You know me, porque.
What?
Yeah. Per Bylund and writing for the Entrepreneur. It's crazy. Oh my god.
Oh, he's here. Alright, cool.
Glad to have.
He's literally in. Hello?
Professor Bylund?
Hello.
Hey,
Hey!
can you hear me?
Yeah.
Sorry, I
Great.
forgot my headphones. I had to sneak out.
No worries.
Alright, no worries. Hello, how's it going?
It's going great. Let me check here. There's something wrong with this sound. Say something again.
Hello? Test?
No?
So is our sound good?
Yeah, you sound good. You just ended up in the wrong
Alright, yeah.
speaker.
So, hello everyone. This is Professor Bylund. He's a fellow at the Mises Institute and an assistant professor of entrepreneurship and a Record Johnson Professor of Free Enterprise in the School of Entrepreneurship and the Spears School of Business at Oklahoma State University, an associate fellow of the Ratio Institute in Stockholm. Thank you for joining us. If you want to say anything else, you can go ahead now.
That's fine. That's a long title, but that's how they do it in academia, I guess.
Yeah. I guess first thing we can say would be like, how did you get into economics?
Wow. That's a question with a much more complex answer than you might expect.
Mm-hmm.
So I was not in economics at all. I started out in informatics and, well, business, and then ended up in political science, where I did a master's degree. And then my wife told me that I should probably quit my job and get into academia because I was doing reading and writing anyway. And I was miserable at my job. I was pretty good at it, but I was miserable doing the job. So I got in touch with Peter Klein through the Mises Institute. And he said basically, how about Missouri? And I was in Sweden at the time, so I was like, give me a map. Where the heck is Missouri? And then I applied, and I started studying there in their PhD program in agricultural economics, which was the department where he was at. And now I'm an economist. I mean, of course, I was aware of Austrian economics before then, right? And I had written for the Mises Institute many years before then. But that was something I got in touch with just through politics. Starting out as a libertarian, sort of free enterprise, free market guy, and then learning the logic behind the free market, and then Austrian economics comes pretty naturally to you.
Yeah.
Is there a libertarian circle in Sweden?
Absolutely, yeah, and a pretty strong one. When I started out, it was a sort of a night watchman state, sort of minarchist, or what I call them statist with a fetish for small. But there weren't really any anarchists, but there are now. I mean, now the number of anarcho-capitalists in Sweden would be several hundred people, I think. So I think it has to do with simply that since Sweden is not, let's just say it's not super libertarian, that society, which just means that some people will just be opposed to and sort of take a position based off of what is, and they're against it, and then they learn libertarianism because that's so far from what Sweden actually is. So it attracts a lot of people, I think, because of that.
Well, then, how did you get to like agorism? Was that like a straight shot, or like, were you an anarcho-capitalist first? Like, what happened?
Yeah. So I think, aren't we all basically born socialists? And then we learn that might not be all that wise. And I mean, then we might stop, or we learn more and more. And I was one of those who learned more and more. So I was fortunate. I did a year in college here in the U.S. Well, some people say it's not the real U.S. because it was in Honolulu, but the Swedish government paid. So hey, why not? And I happened to get Ken Skoglund as my professor in 2 economics courses, and he's sort of he's been in the libertarian movement for quite a while, and he's written The Adventures of Jonathan Gullible, which has been translated to, what is it now, 55 languages or something stupid like that.
Jeez.
Yeah, so he sort of pushed me over the edge. So from being sort of right-wing conservative, sort of free market is good, but not too much, that sort of thing, I learned the real argument, and there was like no turning back. And that was in, let's see, 96, 97. And then after that, I mean, hey, I want to stick to my principles. So my principle was individual freedom. And then the question was just, how the heck does it work? How could it possibly work? How can you replace the state courts and everything like that with something else? I was struggling with that. And I had a friend that I was discussing a lot with back then. And we eventually came across David Friedman's The Machine of Freedom, which solved the problem. But we were sort of in agreement that, no, the state has to go. It's just a matter of how. And I know that was in the fall of 1998 because it was during the election campaign in Sweden. And it was the election campaign that I was elected for office. So I became an anarchist and was elected for office at the same time. So it's easy to remember. But then I was an anarcho-capitalist, right? And then it wasn't really all that hard. I mean, I started reading more and more, and I couldn't quite grasp how you can be sort of an objectivist style anarcho-capitalist, right? That the state has to go and everything, but large powerful corporations, they are it, man. We need to defend them. I'm like, doesn't seem to fit really with the logic for the market and everything. And if there's free entry, no barriers to entry, then why would there be some really powerful, huge corporations? And then I came across Konkin's work, and I'm not sure how that happened, but I did read his New Libertarian Manifesto, and that was sort of it. After that, it was okay. Well, this is pretty obvious. So it was sort of the same experience or same feeling I had when I read Friedman's Machinery of Freedom. Sort of like,
So like,
oh man, I'm stupid. How could I not think of this myself?
yeah. So regarding like corporations and stuff, I know you've written an article responding to Klein, but could you go over like how you keep organization and like big group work and like wage labor and that stuff still afloat? Because I know a lot of agorists tend to like shy away from that idea.
Yeah, and I think it would be probably less common in a free society than it is today. Because you would have, it would be easier to not take a job than it is now, because you don't have to pay taxes. You don't have to, any transaction you do with whomever, you pay taxes basically, right? So everything would be cheaper. And I think in a market society, it would be a seller's market, the labor market. So you always have the option to be your own, either be your sort of self-sustaining farmer growing veggies in your backyard and have a few chickens or whatever, or you're selling your services to your neighbors and whoever is nearby or online or what have you. Or you can just find a forest somewhere and just go and stay away from humanity. So someone who starts a business, meaning someone who has an idea for producing something that hasn't really been done before, they would need someone, and they would need to educate them for how to do it, and they would need to help them figure out how to exactly do those chores and how to bring about that new process and make it happen. And to do that, they will have to, well, first of all, offer a salary that would be worth it to them, because they would learn stuff that they probably couldn't use anywhere else. And they are already in a position where they have some sort of job or some sort of income. So they would have to pay them a lot more. So I see I don't know about the corporation, but the firm in free society would be an implementation of an innovation that requires more people. So you would have to upfront, you would make an investment upfront and pay the cost and pay the laborers, pay the people who work for you and who sort of make things happen before you know that you can actually sell the stuff, right? So there's a sort of the real task for the entrepreneur is bearing that uncertainty. And that's what it would be like in a free society. So there would definitely be contract-based labor in sort of open-ended contracts, like an employment contract is like. But I don't think it would be as common as it is now. I mean, now it's the standard, right? I don't think it would be in a free society.
Yeah, I think that sounds about right. But how do you do you have any like practices you try to defer people and like neighbors and family and that stuff from the state, from like interacting with the state?
Well, anything that comes to mind when I talk to them, right? I mean, agorism is about avoiding as much as you can. And I mean, you're talking to a professor at a state university. So, I mean, sometimes there are not too many options. There are no opportunities to avoid the state and avoid feeding the beast. I mean, if you can pay the neighbor's kid to mow your lawn and not report it, I think basically anyone would do that, right?
Yeah.
And then you could maybe borrow their car if yours breaks down and maybe give them a few dollars for it and what have you. I mean, all of those little things. And I would tell them as well that, well, what you're doing now is it's voluntary, you both benefit, it's all great and good, but you're breaking the law, right? So what is that law worth? So it's sort of an opportunity to educate as well.
Yeah. I think it's time to get more into like the juicy economic stuff. And I have a question about like what has been the most impactful book on entrepreneurship theory that you have read?
Wow. Okay.
Would it be from Mises? Because I know you have defended Mises's theory of the firm and entrepreneurship against, I think it was Lewin's Capital and Disequilibrium.
Yeah, I did write sort of a critical review of his book. That's true.
Yeah.
I think that might actually be right. That in Human Action is probably the most impactful discussion. there is. I mean, other books that have influenced me would be like Lachman's Capital and Its Structure. Not necessarily because I subscribe to everything that he says there, but he places the entrepreneur in the capital structure and talks about how the entrepreneur is the force that changes how things are done. I mean, there are other books that many people will probably mention that are like Kerzner's Competition and Entrepreneurship, which I think it was probably a radical, important book in 1973 when it was published.
Yeah.
But I think the argument is kind of sucky. And I mean, it seems like when you read Human Action, it seems like
It's already implied.
Was that?
Is it that it's like already implied in like Mises's argument?
Well, it's even worse, really, because Mises says on one page, I can't recall which one it is, he talks about the pure entrepreneur, basically like alertness from Kerzner. And then he says that, well, so that's where we would end up if we just follow the logic and sort of dig down into what the core is. The pure entrepreneurship thing would be just being alert to these opportunities. But then he moves on. So if you just turn the page to the next page, he says, well, so this is complete nonsense because we can't do anything with it, and this has nothing to do with the real world. And then he moves on. So it seems like Kerzner never actually turned the page. So he didn't see that there's more to it. So I think Mises is sort of an interesting guy because you have this high theoretician who had this practical background in working with the Chamber of Commerce and everything. So he just like Menger, really, had seen the real market, how it works, and how people act and how transactions come to be and things like that. So they had much more meat than other theorists who have just basically done armchair theorizing. So I think Mises has a much bigger story than Kerzner does. And well, actually, I would probably mention Schumpeter too and his theory of economic development.
The creative destruction idea.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And that I think that term is used in the later book. But in his first book, it's an optimistic, sort of heroic kind of view of the entrepreneur. He has some weird stuff in that book too. So, I mean, he has a full chapter talking about how the government needs to create credit so that entrepreneurs can get purchasing power so they can buy the means of production from the circular flow of production. Because everything is tied up in production already, so someone needs to make sure that entrepreneurs can get their hands on stuff, that's a nonsense idea, right? But
Yeah.
so he has some weird stuff like that, but it inspired me a lot because he's talking about breaking free from what is being done. So, and I think Mises is talking about the same thing. How Mises talks about the promoter entrepreneur, how the promoter entrepreneur sort of makes the big changes, the big shifts in the economy by basically just leading the way, figuring out new things to do and how to do things in a novel way. And when they're successful, then everybody's going to follow suit. And when they're not successful, no one is going to notice, right? So these are the people who are just disruptive in the marketplace. And I think you need to identify these guys and recognize the function in order to understand the market process. Because if you don't understand that entrepreneurs drive the direction sort of production without knowing what people might want to buy, but just sort of imagining it or having a cool idea and let's figure it out or whatever it might be, sort of why they're doing it. But unless you focus on the entrepreneur, you're not going to get it. Then you're going to end up with some Keynesian demand-driven stuff.
Yeah. Have you found entrepreneurship theory to be like compelling to like your students to get into Austrian like School of Economics or?
Yeah, overall, yes. So I mean, I teach a PhD seminar, which is, I mean, it's basically on older theories of entrepreneurship, but I start out with Menger and von Bauwerk and production theory, and so there's a lot of Austrian economics in there, and even in top journals, academic journals in entrepreneurship. They cite Austrians basically all the time. I mean, yeah, of course there's Schumpeter and Kerzner, but there's also Mises in the top journals. There's Lachmann in the top journals and things like that. So that's like super cool, because in economics you wouldn't even find those citations in really bad journals because no one would dare cite them. But in entrepreneurship, it's an intriguing and interesting perspective, and it makes sense, right? If you're studying entrepreneurship, then the market process makes sense, and it definitely makes sense to place the entrepreneur at the very center.
I'm really curious about this primer that you're supposedly writing that's going to come out at the end of the year. What is it like? Do you already have a rough outline?
I have a rough table of contents, sort of, and I have plenty of thoughts on what to put in it. But I mean, the point of that primer is to it's really to have a short introduction, sort of comprehensive, but not in detail, but give the reader a good idea of what Austrian economics is about and why it matters. So one way of putting it is like it's Hazlitt's economics in one lesson, but it's purely Austrian economics, and it's about half as long. So that's sort of the point of it. And I want to do it, I was going to say Twitter style. I'm not going to do it in 280 character chunks, but I'm gonna do it like sort of forceful writing, explicit, to the point, easy to read, easy to understand, and not go into these details that don't really matter for the big picture stuff. Yeah. So it's supposed to be one of those books that when you're at Thanksgiving dinner and your aunt says something crazy and you go, oh, you don't get it, you should read something about Austrian economics. Here, take this, read it. And they can read it and they can understand it.
Book that appeals to the layman.
What was that?
So it's like a real book that applies to, the layman.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So it's supposed to be something that anybody can read and sort of understand and hopefully be intrigued about too, and know that. But when they've read it, the point should be that they go, oh, now I know something about the economy and now I understand how it works, and this is actually pretty cool.
Yeah. I don't know how you stay so active on Twitter and how you deal with all the people you do. It's actually mind-boggling. Is there a method to the madness or something?
Well, to stay active is simply a matter of trying to avoid doing real work, right? So it's not that. I mean, I sort of use Twitter both to vent and to find inspiration for stuff. So when I write columns and things like that, then Twitter is awesome because I can write a column every time I get pissed off, and on Twitter, it's every other tweet basically.
Yeah. So
just browsing my feed and I get stuff for a number of columns.
Is there like do you think entrepreneurial theory and the theory of the firm is the branch that Austrian econ should really focus in this growing growth of the school, I would say?
It's definitely one of them. Right, so I mean they go well together, and they should probably be the same theory, sort of. And it's I usually say that Austrian economics sort of prides itself for being the school of economic thought where we have a theory of the entrepreneur and we have a theory of capital. And that's true. The problem is that both theories are pretty underdeveloped and pretty crappy. So we have theories, but they're not very good. So we need to dig down and do more there. So I think both of those would definitely be where to go. I mean, we're learning more, of course, every year that passes. There's more scholarship. But I think where we can make a difference and where we can make the school famous again and influential, not necessarily politically, but influential in people's lives, that is entrepreneurship, I think. I mean, how to run businesses, what the businesses do, how to create value, how to create prosperity, what does economic growth mean, where does it come from? All of these things are really entrepreneurship questions. right? So, and I mean, take the agorist spin on entrepreneurship, then it is how do you turn your back on the state and create your own source of revenue and just money to your own. How do you earn a living while staying under the radar? I mean, entrepreneurship would be the obvious choice, right? You can't take on employment somewhere. You definitely can't work for the state, and sitting under a tree somewhere alone is also not very very attractive. So I mean, the one thing to do would basically be just be your own and start your own business. And I think if agorists start their own business and sell their services to each other and create networks for transacting and use whatever decentralized currencies there are and things like that, then that could definitely be sort of the anarchist mantra, right? That we create new institutions within the shells of the old.
Yeah.
So you can create something sound and something working and something that is both fair and effective and not very costly by simply doing things on the side of what is so-called legitimate and legit society.
It's interesting that you mentioned capital theory as like it needs like a focus still. Do you think the contemporary like writers like Lewin and others have been doing like a good job with it, like in the idea of the Austrian school?
Well, I think they're getting there. So they're definitely making progress, and I think the recent stuff by Lewin and Kaczynowski, when they are sort of redefining capital theory by looking at it in value terms rather than in capital goods terms, that's definitely a step forward. I mean, Bob Murphy, I think he did his PhD dissertation on capital theory too. So I mean, there is some interesting stuff out there. It's just that it's not worked out. It's what we have is, I mean, say you have Hayek's pure theory of capital, which is
a mess.
Not good. Yeah, it's not good at all. And you can tell that he was writing that book because he didn't know shit about capital theory, so he needed to figure stuff out. And that's why he wrote the book, just trying to figure out what do I believe about this stuff, right? Let me write it down and then maybe I'll see. And then Lachman's Capital and Structure, which is a good book, but it's short and it's vague in the sense that it's very abstract, right? So it doesn't actually go into detail very much. It doesn't tell us about the processes. It just says that there are processes, right? So we need to dig into that because it's so core. Both entrepreneurship and capital theory, they're so core to understanding the economy and how it works. So we need to know a whole lot more. If we are to actually understand the market process, we need to know more about these things.
I've heard excellent things about your book, The Problem of Production, A New Theory of the Firm. Even Mackage has said it is a compelling Austrian argument that makes the firm's appearance even more fundamental than the market. I find that really interesting. Can you like elaborate what that means? Like, how is it more fundamental than the market?
Yeah. So in that book, I sort of argue for entrepreneurship it precedes the market. So the market would be the outcome of entrepreneurs competing. But if you think about, if you just let the market be and sort of like Rothbard does in An Economy and State, and you said, oh, let's keep everything static, and then let's just people work out where they are and everything, and then we're going to end up in the evenly rotating economy and that stuff, right? I mean, if we have everything perfectly free, but we don't have any organization, we don't have any coordination of stuff, we're going to end up with people specializing and becoming more and more effective in what they do. But at some point, they're going to sort of hit the wall. So they're not going to be able to do a whole lot more. And I think Adam Smith was sort of into this too, was talking about how the division of labor increases by the size of population and population growth. And I think that is true, unless there is a means by which entrepreneurs can break free from this sort of create islands where they can utilize greater specialization than anybody else is already doing in the marketplace. Because what that means is simply what we talked about before, but that if I have envisioned something new to create, or something new to produce, or a new way of producing something that's already produced, then I have to find the people willing to do it. I have to pay them up front. I have to tell them what we're doing, and we have to figure out exactly how to do it. Right? So when doing this, we're not actually part of the market. We're not transacting with anybody else, and we have only ourselves. And if this works out, then fine. But if any of us fail, if any link in this chain fails, then the whole thing fails. Right? So we stand and fall together. And that to me is sort of the argument for what we can call a firm, economically speaking. So it's the entrepreneur with however many people he or she thinks is needed to bring about this implementation of this new innovation. This is going to be an island that is not just individual transactions, but it's much more coordinated, much more integrated than the rest of the market. Mm-hmm. And what that means, of course, is if it becomes very profitable, then someone else is going to say, hey, wait a minute, how come they're making so much money? And they're going to try to copy what we're doing. And the more people start copying, then the market will sort of subsume and eat up and become or catch up with what these islands are doing. So this new level of specialization will become part of the market. So in a sense, this is how the market can break through that natural limit on the sort of the rate of increase in the division of labor. So that's how I started out theorizing on this and trying to figure out what would be an economic function for the firm. What would it mean economically speaking, without thinking of government license in order to call yourself a firm and crap like that, because it's not economic, right? And then what I find in that book is that, well, if this is the firm, then the firm is pretty core to what entrepreneurs do, to or at least what promoters do in the economy, to disrupt the economy and direct the economy or put it on new trajectories, basically.
That's really interesting, because I've never really thought about, because I've thought about the entrepreneur is take advantages of the market in Kersner terms, but I've never thought about well, the market originally starts with these taking advantages of something in the baseline.
Right, and for Kersner, I mean, you need already a specialized market around you, and then there some things are not perfect, and that's an opportunity to make it perfect, right? Because you're solving problems, you're basically reducing the amount of error in all those transactions that are already taking place. Well, I mean, then you're assuming that there's a market already, but where did that come from? Mm-hmm. Right. So I just turned the argument upside down, and I'm saying that, well, within the realm of the existing market, yeah, you can do the Kersnerian thing and just do arbitrage basically, and buy at low prices, sell at high prices, and in other markets, and figure that stuff out, and thereby equilibrate. But that's not going to solve the problem of the extent of the market, because it's still going to be the same. It's just going to be more effective within that extent. But how do you expand it? I mean, if you're a free marketeer, free market theorist, then how the market expands should be the real problem, right? Because making it more effective, what already exists, yeah, fine, that's, I guess, interesting. But how does it grow? How does it get anywhere from here, right? Those transactions, this arbitrage type of alertness to opportunity doesn't really change much. It just changes the structure of the system that already exists. It doesn't actually expand the system. But what we're seeing is that the economy actually does expand. I mean, economic growth is not just cutting costs a little bit and solving a few problems and reducing the amount of error in the economy. It's doing completely different stuff, figuring out completely new innovations, new technologies, all this stuff, right?
So does your theory of the firm have something to do with the idea or does it even argue for an equilibrating like process, even though it's never actualized or something across those lines?
Well, it places the firm, what I call the firm, that's sort of the island of specialization. It places it at the core of what is economic growth by simply saying that by establishing it, the entrepreneur disrupts whatever market structure already is. But then because that entrepreneur is able to basically step ahead and do things much more effectively and efficiently from the consumer value point of view, not necessarily engineering wise, right? But they create more value, so they get more profits. And then other entrepreneurs will copy them, which is sort of an equilibrating process, right? But it follows the disequilibrating. So the market catches up through these mimicking copycat entrepreneurs. So it's both, right? So you have the first one or the first few, they would challenge the market the way it is currently by introducing something new, and then you would have others following suit and copying what they're doing. That would be equilibrating, considering this new state of knowledge, or whatever you want to call it, because of this first entrepreneur. So it's both. It sort of goes back and forth between disequilibrated and equilibrating.
Does anybody else have any questions? I'm sorry. Alex, Ryan, anybody?
Not really. A lot of stuff I was gonna like questioning about already got answered. What else we talk about?
Actually, I have one question just in the firm. So, you know how Bombaverk places production time at the beginning or in the middle of its APP? Would you view the same with the firm in the market? Would you place the firm at the center, at the heart of the market, and everything else expands outside the firm?
Wow. I'm not sure. I mean, the way the economy is today, everything is pretty much screwed up, right? So theory can help us figure out what is screwed up and how to unscrew it, I guess. I mean, what I do in that book is place the firm at the very core of what progress basically is.
Mm-hmm.
So it is the implementation of a higher level of specialization. It is really not much more, but it requires that you have an entrepreneur who bears the uncertainty of that idea and tries to implement it and so forth. I'm sure there's some Bombaverkian thought in there too. I mean, I think Mises put in, was it his memoirs or some place like that, where he said that he didn't actually figure out anything new. He just combined truths from before that other people had already said in sort of new packaging or in new ways. And in a sense, I mean, that's what everybody's doing, right? That we have read different things, and I've read up on many of the older Austrians, and whether I recognize it or not, I'm probably sort of free riding on their genius. So in reading Bombaverk, that was a big part of figuring out the whole production structure stuff, right? And same thing with Striegel and Lachmann, also production structure stuff. Menger on value, Mises on, well, practically everything, I guess. And then eventually something will just say, voila, in your mind that, oh, wait a minute, this is how it works. And then that's your new theory, but it probably draws from practically everybody. I'm not sure I answered your question at all. I'm sorry.
Oh.
I have a question from one of our members that just couldn't join. His question was, in regards to the Austrian definition of inflation, I noticed you had an article about Mises defining inflation as an increase in money supply without increases in demand, leading to diminution in objective exchange value of money. However, I think many Austrians employ the term inflation to the increase in money supply, as they think the rise in price level is the outcome, not a cause. However, I still think that Mises' definition is better. It's more in line with the colloquial understanding, and we have terms to explain the monetary policy factors that cause the rise in price levels, i.e. inflationary and deflationary policy. And he asked, what are your thoughts?
What are my thoughts?
Yeah.
That's sort of an open-ended question. Yeah, I mean, typically when Austrians argue stuff online, you get the very simplified version,
Hmm.
right? So many of the nuances are not there. So when I tweet about stuff, for instance, it's really hard to get all the nuances in there in 280 characters, which is why I use tweet storms or those long threads to just walk people through the reasoning, and then they hopefully can fill in the blanks themselves. So I think inflation is one of those, but it is something that distinguishes Austrians from everybody else, because they're just measuring prices and assuming that there's a price level, and then they're measuring how the price level increases, and that's their inflation. Whereas Austrians would say no, that's it's really the increase in the money supply, which is the classical definition, right? It's what the classical economists talked about. So what prices actually end up being charged in the marketplace, I mean, that's a matter of all kinds of things, and it's a matter of the bargaining power of the parties. It's a matter of how urgent some people think it is to sell or buy and all this stuff, right? So if there's more money around, then yeah, it's going to have an effect on prices. It doesn't mean that the actual price goes up, right? It just means that the price will probably be higher than it otherwise would be. Not necessarily for every good, but for goods in general. So I mean, the classical economists, they understood that well, you can tamper with things like the money supply, and it doesn't necessarily have a noticeable effect. But a true economist, a real economist, would look at the unseen, right? What is actually going on here? So just because prices don't rise doesn't mean that it was not harmful, right? So it could have been the case that they would have fallen had it not been for this jerk printing dollars, right? So, but now we didn't get the fall in prices. Instead, we got the same prices pretty much. And people say, oh, well, cool, then we got free money. No, we didn't. We lost out on all these cheap goods that we would have been able to buy otherwise, right? So I think the problem is a little bit exaggeration for effect, to just say, no, it's money supply, or not to say, no, it's prices. And the other is lack of time and space to cover the nuances, and people are really not interested in nuances either. I mean, you can do the curse of knowledge thing, that you can't really express yourself clearly just because there's so many details that you hold in your mind, and you want to maybe be perfectly accurate with everything. And that's a problem in communication, right? If you want to be effective in your communication, you need to simplify, and you need to make sure that you're communicating on the receiver's terms. And I mean, online, the receiver is almost always an economic illiterate. So you need to start with the basics, right? So you can't shower them with nuances, because they're just gonna go, what the heck are you talking about?
I see people constantly responding to your poverty is the natural state of man tweet, and just going, no, this is like baloney, this is bullshit. I find it hilarious. So yes, most people are not rational voters, in the words of Brian Kaplan.
Yeah, true. I mean, and that tweet also, that it has also forced a few people to crawl out from under the rock where they were hiding. These Marxists believing that everything was perfect and everybody had everything, until there was this one guy who just said, this piece of land is mine, and that ruined everything.
Yeah.
I mean, there are people actually believing this crap. And I debated a guy in Stockholm, Sweden. He's from some university in New York City, I think, a Marxist. And he was claiming that, no, it's all about when the aristocracy started claiming the common lands in the UK in, I think, the 1500s or something. That's when everything went down the tubes. Before then, I suppose everybody was rich or something. And I mean, that is just crazy. I mean, people were starving to death before then. And they certainly didn't have iPhones or healthcare or vaccines or what have you. So to claim that they were rich, no, they had access to common lands maybe, but they definitely weren't rich. So to blame blame that. I mean, I'm not in favor of the aristocracy stealing people's land, of course, but to claim that that is the problem and otherwise we would all have enough, that's just ridiculous.
Yeah, completely agree. Especially since Jamestown, I believe it was Jamestown. It was a great example of this, where they practice like, oh, like, you know, do what you need, or like farm how you need, and then they went through like poverty for a couple of years, and people were starving off, and then they eventually like paid people to do it and created a market for it, and they survived. So.
And that's the story of any attempt at socialism, right? That's why socialists always claim that it wasn't real, because it started out with, oh, let's just steal people's stuff, and let's make everything everybody's. But I'll just keep it myself since I'm the dictator, right? And then just let's give people whatever. Well, it always very quickly just falls to pieces. You have like a really wealthy nation of Venezuela where they have plenty of oil, where suddenly they're unable to get oil out of the ground. Now, how the heck did that happen? When you have the knowledge, you have the tools, you have a lot of oil, but suddenly they're all eating their pets because they're starving to death. And I mean, that's because you don't have a system for economic calculation. You have a society that is based on the faith that people are not self-interested and that people are altruistic primarily. So they would go out and work for others, even if their families are starving. Everybody realizes, if you think about it, that's just nonsense. And then you have the alternative system, of course, is the market, where you gain yourself if you create value for others. I mean, how beautiful is that? You're playing off of what people are. We are self-interested. We do love our families and our loved ones much more than anybody else. So we are going to prefer those people, and we are going to want more because we can lead better lives. Well, if I in improving my life, I have to serve others, and that's the only way of doing it. That's beautiful. That means there are no contradictions whatsoever. Because the only way I can get filthily rich and have, I don't know, shorts made out of gold and what have you, and the only way I can get there is to serve people better than everybody else is serving them.
Yeah.
There's everything to gain from this type of system, and I don't really understand how people can be against that at all.
Yeah, I think a lot of them just don't understand like the idea of Hayek called it spontaneous order, right? Like turning self-interest into societal interest, and those institutions that do that perfectly are the market and others, of course. But do you find yourself converting a lot of like socialists, or do you just engage with them to show, you know, who not to interact with?
Well, yeah, a little bit of both, I guess. I think the most powerful thing you can do, I mean, especially online and things like that, it's really to ask questions that make people think. So to say things about things that people know something about, but not necessarily a whole lot, but just twist it around a little bit, turn it on its head, so that when they read it, they recognize it, and then they go, wait a minute, what the heck is going on here? This is exactly the wrong conclusion, or this is not what I've been taught, or yeah, that I can see what it's saying, but that sounds ridiculous. It sounds so weird, right? So it forces them to think, because I'm an optimist. I mean, and I want to think that everybody's interested in learning about the world and in knowing more stuff. Everybody's interested in betterment in some sense, right? So I think if you just give them a reason, then they want to figure out the solution to it. So asking questions, I mean, that could mean that people start the journey down the rabbit hole, and I hope that I can push people to do that. And of course, online people are really angry and they think they win if they say the F word first and all this stuff. And well, let them do that then. It's sort of very childish. So it's,
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes I get carried away with it too, and some people, they just, for some reason, they trigger me. So I do the thing that they do, and I guess there's entertainment value in that too for others. Saying, hey, look at that university professor, he's doing exactly what everybody else is doing on Twitter. I have a hard time seeing how that is entertaining, but I try to stay away from it, and I try to take it back to discussing the actual issues, because very often it's just that they have an emotional reaction on whatever we're talking about, and if you just make them think about it, they realize that, oops, that was not actually very good.
Yeah. Speaking of people who infuriate me, Lord Keynes was suspended from Twitter, apparently. I don't know if you saw that in your timeline.
I did see that. That's
It's a win for the free world, you know.
Yeah, I was sort of. I would say it's expected because he was sort of an asshole.
Yeah.
So that people would report his tweets, for instance. It's I'm not
for it, yeah, but I mean, like, it's just ironic almost.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, he was super ignorant, but that's pretty common on Twitter too.
Mm-hmm.
And he was funny in the sense that he could always give a couple of comments in a back and forth that were sort of reasonable and almost compelling at times, and then he always resorted to rubbish or something like that because he didn't have answers to it. He doesn't actually have the knowledge that he thinks he has. So all he has is some blog that he put up on the web, and well, anyone can create a blog. His arguments on the blog, I mean, they look. I've been through a few of his pages there, and they look legit when you look at them because they're really long and he's quoting at length. But when he's trying to critique Austrians, for instance, he actually never gets to the point. So in many of these blog posts, he's like, oh, I explain everything in this blog post. And in the beginning, I was like, okay, I'll read it. I was like, where? Where is the explanation? You're just quoting people at length. And then you just, that's it. Like, that doesn't mean anything. Tell me the argument. What is the argument? And then, of course, you get rubbish. That's the only response.
Yeah. There's like a new generation of like Lord Keynes followers growing in like the online movement of like economics. It seems like economics as a field is growing just from these generations kind of caring, and MMT is really like at a center of a lot of people's opinions, and it's very sad.
Yeah, for some reason you have these sort of very ignorant big state morons. It doesn't matter what argument that you sort of kill that they have, because they always come back with a new argument that is basically the same thing, but it's just dressed up in something else. So they just say, oh, this is the new trend, let's do that. So markets don't work because climate change. Okay, well then we have to kill that argument too. And every time we get bogged down with all this stuff, whereas we could have a productive discussion about the economy instead. But I mean, we still need to do something, because we can't do basically what Hayek did with Keynes, just let it go, because we can see where that took us, right?
Oh yeah.
So had he just crushed the general theory in a review, then maybe we would not be where we're at. I mean, if you look at the actual reviews after that book was published, the senior scholars in economics, they were not impressed. They did not like that book, right? So he was famous. People liked him. People saw him as the party guy and
charismatic, yeah,
all of this stuff. But they read the book and they were like, "What kind of crap is this?" And you have plenty of the first reviews. They were like, "Oh, this is nonsense. What is this guy even saying?" And of course, if you read it, then he has his own definitions of all the core terms that everybody was already using in economics, just to confuse people. But then he had his cadre of students, just basically his missionaries, just spreading the word in different ways. Joan Robinson and the others. And eventually that just, of course, politicians were super happy with his ideas, right? They find a supposed theory to justify all the policies that they always wanted to do anyway.
Mm-hmm. I find like these growing movements of like MMT, wow, intellectually they have like curiosity on all this stuff, and it's worth like arguing against. A lot of it is like confirmation biases for like these status and stuff, and it reminds me of like this quote that I was reading when I was reading like anti-Fed stuff. It was like, it's difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on his not understanding of it.
Yeah, right.
And I don't know. It's at a point, there's a lot of people who are pessimistic about like exchanging and interacting with, not exchanging, but interacting with these people. And especially like a lot of people are worried about platforming bad people or something like of that nature. But I'm glad you and others find really like optimistic like routes of like, well, you have to stay on Twitter, you have to like promote something, so at least, you know, they don't win.
Yeah, and I like the debate too. I mean,
to
be honest with you, I like butting heads with these idiots, because I know I can win, but it's not really about the winning, because it's about whoever is reading the threads, right? It's you're never in a debate to actually persuade the other guy of your views, because you're in the debate because you have very strong views and you don't share the other guy's views. That's why you have the debate, right? So all debates are for whoever is listening. And on Twitter, that could be millions of people if you're lucky. So, I mean, if you seem to be the serious one, if you try to reason about things, if you point to mistakes the other party did before, and if you just stay calm, then you've already won half the battle, pretty much.
Yeah, I'm glad that like I said, I'm glad that you have this optimism, and I'm guessing optimism about liberty and like libertarianism in general, as a growing movement, because I know politically it's hard to see, at least in like number of votes or what have you, but it definitely does seem like there's something there.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, in the number of votes, I mean, the Libertarian Party sucks pretty much.
Yeah.
So it's I think it's a good sign that people don't take the time to vote for them, right? So it just means that they're more into liberty than those schmucks in the party. So that's a good thing. That's a good sign. And the others are just in it for their gang to win and rule for the day, and then you know what happens after the next election, and the other guys are gonna win, and then they're gonna push back, and of course they all like the same things. They like war and death and all this stuff. I mean, that's what they're in for. That's what they like, and it's like a petty game. So I mean, we can stand on the sidelines and do something else. Reality is still reality. So they can try to create something else. I mean, the MMTers can think that, oh well, we don't need to care about how much money we print. We can just print forever and we'll see what happens. As long as there is no price inflation, it's all fine. Yeah, they can believe so and go ahead for a little while, and we know that reality is going to screw them over big time. I mean, it's going to be, they're basically dropping the soap in the prison, right? That's what they're doing. So I don't see that as a problem. The problem, of course, is that many people are going to hurt, and they're going to hurt a lot because of these bad ideas. But I think the optimism is really, we can't win that game, right? Because it's really a game of bidding over the other guy with a third party's funds. And we can't do that. We can't even play that game. But what we can do is create new institutions and create an alternative and stand for an alternative. I think that's where agorism is so powerful, that you can show your neighbors, you can show your family, you can show people everywhere that what you're doing is moral, and they can see it's moral. There's nothing wrong with it. And you can point out that, well, this is super illegal, or this is not allowed, and this is not by the book, and what have you, all of these things, right? But see what we did here? We both gained, and everybody's happy, except for the politicians. But
Yeah.
and then create ways to solve conflicts and protect each other and what have you, all of these things, right? Because when things come crashing down, whether it's a small crash and everything really stays in place, but there's going to be a bunch of hurt for a while, or it's a big crash, everything just goes down the tubes, then we should be ready to, well, first of all, have what we need to not hurt ourselves, and then to be ready to inform people that the reason we're in this bad situation is because you listened to these false prophets. You believed in magic. The magic is not real, right? So join us instead. Step away from the dark side.
So I'm guessing I find myself in a little bit of disagreement on the idea of like I usually tell like other libertarians who are like who are a little bit like discouraged from voting, I usually tell them to vote libertarian as an idea of like throwing out a number, because if it grows, then it means there's something to it. That's, you know, like, because we're not going to win the national vote. It's a joke idea to think that we're going to win, but it might be something as a like a number, like when Justin Amash switched over. Yeah, he's not at all a perfect libertarian, but there was something to it, you know. But I'm all for this idea of like, you know, getting away as far as possible from the state, with the idea of a crash in mind or not, just like trying to set up your own communities outside of the state's reach.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what you're trying to do, right? I mean, if it's your thing to try to change society overall, then, well, whatever floats your boat. But
yeah,
I came to the inside a long time ago. Well, after 10 years in politics, which makes me a little bit stupid, but I realized that you can't really change the system from within, because the system is not made to be changed in our direction at all. The system has incentives, and all the incentives go in the absolute other direction. So there's no way you can change the system from within. You can't even change it a little bit towards liberty. What you can do is just, well, it can go bankrupt, and there can be a small crisis, but then it's going to grow again. So I mean, you can't make any change that way, and I mean, your vote does hardly counts at all. And if you feel like it, go vote, whatever. But it's not going to make much of a difference.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want to lead a life in freedom, and if you want to do that, then save yourself first.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
So save yourself, and then by doing that, you're setting a good example. You're showing people it's possible. And I think that is much more powerful than casting a vote, and even if you put the "I voted" sticker on your shirt.
Yeah, no, fair enough. So I'm guessing you find yourself in disagreement with like Hoppe's idea of like decentralized societies and stuff, or trying to get to there through like local voting.
I'm disillusioned with respect to politics, because that's just a crappy system. It's made for power. I mean, I really think it is a system made to fool the masses into believing they have some influence, and they really don't. I mean, of course they accept some people into the political class, but I mean, look at them. Look at Nancy Pelosi. She's been in there. She's been on Capitol Hill since 1842. Or something like that. And she's still there. She's super rich, and she's on the poor guy's side. Yeah, bullshit. There's no way that she's on the poor guy. She hasn't seen
get bigger while theirs get lower.
Yeah, and she hasn't seen a poor guy for decades. Come on. There's like no way that is believable at all. She's in the political class, and that's basically a royalty, right? And the question is, do we support royalty? Do we recognize that it is royalty, which is not true, or do we just say that, look, the emperor's new clothes? No, he's naked, right? Just point that out, and turn away and leave, because I think what they can't take, these power hungry in the political elite, is that we don't care about them. Right? So they can take critique, and because they will just make up a few more laws and put people in jail and what have you. But what they can't take is if we just ignore them, because then they're nothing. They can't do anything. They don't know anything. They're completely unproductive. They're the filth of any population. They are in there, right? But they think they're fancy because people allow them to think so. But they're not doing anything. So just ignoring them, I think, is the best way to go about it.
Yeah, fair enough. As like you said, and everybody points this out, but that's why a lot of people are like libertarians somewhere in heart, because the system does not change. Like, for instance, people are like, oh, Trump was bombing this, but then it happens the next 100 days when Biden gets elected and all this stuff. He hasn't cracked down on anything that was this immoral actions that Trump was doing.
Yeah, and you still saw that under the W. Bush era, where the anti-war movement was huge and people were in the streets and demonstrating and everything, and then Obama was elected and it was gone.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, the libertarians were still there, I guess, but all the Democrats left because, oh yeah, we got a Democratic president now. Great. Now wars don't matter anymore, or wars are good. Like, what? So they weren't actually anti-war. They were anti-Bush's war. But hey, this is our side killing children and women in foreign countries. These are good deaths.
Yeah. It's a plane fried by the Democrats. It's way different. You wouldn't get it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And it's these are kind bombs.
Yeah, we're changing it. We're making it more diplomatic over there. Well, how do you find yourself, like, as a professor dealing with like income tax? I know you're probably like there's things that you can't say legally, and I'm not asking you to commit tax evasion or anything, but it must be like hard on you that you have to like at least admit that I'm a professor, I get money.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, like I said a while ago, I work for a state university. There's no way I can escape taxation. Right? So, and since I'm so open with hating taxation, it would be pretty stupid to try things too. Right? So I have to pay the damn thing, which sucks. But if I didn't, I mean, I'm even a foreigner, right? So I'm not even a citizen in this country. So here we have this foreigner libertarian cheating on his taxes. Well, thanks. That would be a very easy target for anyone hating libertarians or foreigners or what have you. So I can't do that, right? But I can tell people that there are plenty of opportunities out there, and I think entrepreneurship is a good way. And you don't have to do it. I was going to say illegitimately, but you don't have to do it to break the law necessarily. I mean, look at Uber, for instance. That's entrepreneurship, and they challenged the system, and they got rid of a lot of regulations. And they did not necessarily break the law. I mean, they were definitely in the gray zone, I guess.
Yeah, like
right?
offshore accounts and like breaking tax loops and that kind of stuff.
Right, and I mean, and of course you should minimize the taxes. I mean, it's not like I'm saying, oh, I'm not gonna do the deductions thing because I mean, of course, use whatever you can. I mean, it's just it's the right thing to do to try to minimize your taxes. Everybody's doing that. I hope. But of course I do those things, but am I doing anything illegal to avoid taxation? Not that I'm aware of, because I cannot.
Oh yeah.
The risk is just
too much in the public eye. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I think it's more important that people learn entrepreneurship and learn how the market works, so that we can get rid of the crap.
Oh yeah, at least you're in that position to like inform people of like the right way the market acts instead of this bureaucratic bullshit that we have now.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I guess someone has to do that, and then I guess I'll pay the taxes and I'll do that.
Is there like an agorist like circle or like a community that you do know of where you live? Not saying you engage in part of it, but
I'm aware of a guy from C4SS who is in Tulsa, where I live. I've never met the guy, so I've never been to any of. I guess they have some kind of meetings or something, but I've never met them. I know there are a few students at the University of Oklahoma, which is maybe 2 hours from here. And they have like an SFL conference every other year or every year, something like that, on anarchism. So they should be anarchists too. So I'm sure there's a bunch of activism here. I mean, I've chosen the other route. I started out with activism and had all these huge manifestations for free markets and stuff like that in Stockholm. But that's, I mean, some people are simply really good at it and other people are not. And I was in the not camp. So I tried something else. So, I mean, I write, I love to write. So I write a lot. And hopefully, who knows, eventually I might get the Nobel Prize and then people just have to listen, right?
Oh yeah. See what this guy's talking about, you know? Have you ever thought about like moving towards liberty? Because usually like a great example of like a really prosperous nation and generally peaceful and friendly and all this stuff, I usually point to the micronation of like Liechtenstein and that kind of idea where the government's really out of your hair. They don't like to try to like impede. Like, have you ever just thought about like moving to a different state? Of course, probably after you retire.
Yeah, in a sense that would be the plan, right? So if what you need is to have passive income. So, I mean, how do you do that? Well, you can have rental properties. That's something that a lot of people do. You can have books or music, so you get royalties, or you can save a lot of money in index funds or whatever fits you, and then retire at an early age. I mean, I wouldn't mind retiring way before 65, which doesn't mean stop writing or anything. It just means stop doing the university bullshit. So no more forms, no more discussing with colleagues on endless committee meetings and all this stuff. Instead, I can focus on what I think is really matters and what is fun. I mean, that's definitely part of the plan. Where I would go, I mean, it does seem like the world, and with the pandemic, it's not like things got better anywhere.
Oh yeah.
So I have no clue where to go, if anywhere. Or, I mean, one way of finding freedom is to become filthy rich, right? Then you can buy a mansion somewhere and then just pay people to do whatever stuff you don't want to do. So
be the Koch brothers.
Yeah, well, sure. Which in this case would mean find a dad who starts a business that you can then run and become successful with. But I mean, yeah, getting enough money so that you can just quit whenever you like and move somewhere else. No one ever turns people down when they're wealthy, right? So you can move to any country you like, pretty much. I wouldn't say I'm there, but I mean.
Well, if you write this primer, you will be soon. I mean, like it will be like in my pre-order list. If not, I will already have like gave donations to Mises Institute just to get the book.
Oh, that's excellent. Thank you. Yeah. I mean, it's not going to get me any money, but it might.
Yeah.
In the way I think about it is that writing this sort of thing, if it gets a lot of attention, if people start reading it and start buying the book, I'm not going to make any money off of that, but it might open other opportunities to say give talks or write for, I don't know, magazines or get a book contract somewhere else, or I don't know how to make money, but I should probably ask Tom Woods that. But all of these other opportunities, right? I mean, you sort of need a personal brand. So that book could become part of my brand, perhaps. And then I could ride that wave a little bit and do something good with it. But the book itself is not going to make me a lot of money, but I might get invitations to speak. Yeah, exactly. And invitations to speak at different organizations or meetings and stuff like that. Maybe get a little check or something like that for that. But
I think it will be. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I think it's just part of the mix, and trying to get the whole personal branding thing and finding your niche and do your thing. And I mean, I think that's something that everybody should probably do. That's a good strategy, I think, to do something you love and that you're passionate about, and then make it
money off of
yours.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And it's easier to make money off it the more known you are and the more you've done. So the longer you stay with it and do your thing, the easier it is. And then, of course, like with many of these people who become famous, when they are famous, then all the crap that they wrote before is suddenly much better. So people are going to find your old stuff and they're going to go, wow, this is amazing. Look at the depth
Oh, yeah.
of this thing. And had they read it before you became famous, they would go like, what the hell is this crap?
I do think it will be something for kind of like how the Mises Institute has been treating Econ in One Lesson, where I know as a group we have bought hundreds of copies and people have them in their car wanting to like give them out if they've ever like run into somebody who like questions anything. So it might be something like that where, you know, you give it out to your family members, and I know that's the plan. So
Yeah, and I think maybe I'm saying too much, but I think what Jeff Deist wants to do with this primer is to make it available. I mean, of course, put it online and all that stuff, so you can download it to your Kindle or get the PDF and print it yourself if you enjoy that sort of thing. Or that he would just sell it through the Mises bookstore for like $5 or something. So it's not going to break the bank, and everybody should be able to afford it and afford to buy dozens of copies and then just hand it out to people. I mean, that's sort of the plan to just drown the world in Austrian economics.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm glad you're writing it, because I actually find like at least your articles. I haven't read I think it's your two books, the problem of production, and then the seen, unseen. Yeah.
And the unrealized,
Yeah. But I do think your articles are just straight to the point. Like the BS just really isn't there. You tackle, like, if you're rejoining something, you tackle it pretty simple. So at least this book will be in a good hands.
Thank you. No pressure, right?
Oh yeah, no pressure. I mean, well, a lot of people nowadays find Econ in One Lesson kind of like, sadly, they find it kind of just exhausting, because every chapter is the same idea and they realize the idea after chapter 4, right? So, but at least this will be on Austrian econ in general. So
yeah, exactly. And it's going to be about the economy and what economics is, and just run through it pretty fast. I mean, the whole point is basically what I use Twitter for, and all my writings on Mises.org and everything too, that just to make sure that people become a little bit economically literate. And that's the point of the primer too. I mean, if you read that thing, you should see the world differently, because you should suddenly understand how the economy works, so you will see everything differently.
You should open up with that Rothbard quote about it's not a problem to be economically illiterate unless you like make opinions on it or something across.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's definitely a part of the inspiration. Right.
Well, if anybody else has any questions, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I wanted to ask you a question on strategy, as I know you're an agorist. So, like, what are your thoughts on like the idea of like a paleo strat and like secession?
Could you say that again?
So I know you're an agorist, so you advocate like an agorist like way of achieving a free society. But like, what are your general thoughts on like the paleo strategy and secession?
Well, I have no problem with secession. I think that's good. I don't think that just because you go to smaller units that it's going to be more liberty. So I think it's definitely a way of chopping up the beast in more easily manageable parts, I guess. I mean, it could mean complete terror somewhere, right? So secession, I mean, that's a start, I think. And I mean, the state is always centralizing, so of course we should try to decentralize. But I'd rather just wipe it off the map and get rid of it. So I don't see a reason to go about it in roundabout ways, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, I know we mentioned Hoppe's like idea of like decentralization and that kind of stuff. But yeah, like just freeing yourself from the problem at least, and then showing like being almost a virtuous citizen or whatever you want to call yourself, is probably the best way of like showing a community. So
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that's the conclusion that I got to after many years of thinking about it and reading and, well, doing politics too. That I mean, the system is not for us. The system is against us. So try to use it. I mean, it really is like Frodo in the ring. If you try to use it for good, well, it's just going to corrupt you. It's not going to do any good. So the best thing is to throw it in the fire and get rid of it. And then build something voluntary, something positive, something productive with other people. I mean, people. I think people in general are good.
oh yeah,
And they're smart. They don't have a reason to learn a lot about formal economics. They have other things to think about. They have a family and they want to put food on the table and they have bills to pay and they have hobbies and friends and they have a sick mother and I don't know what they might have, right? So those things, of course, go first. I mean, in a sense, what they're doing is economizing, right? They're economizing on their time and their effort, which is a good thing. They should do that. And way too many people are economists in a sense, right? We should have many fewer economists, especially the bad ones. So I mean, what we should do is just educate them, and that's sort of why I'm on Twitter too. It's not about writing journal articles that no one will ever read. It's not really about the formal education either. I mean, that's fine, and that's how I get paid too. But it's also being a public scholar, like Mises said many times too. I mean, it's about being the person who knows and has given this a lot of thought and can inform people and tell them what it's really about. Right? This is how it works. And then explain it to them in simple terms so that they get it. I mean, that's what we should do. Not lock ourselves up in ivory towers and then pride ourselves that we're really good at what we're doing, because that doesn't matter.
Especially as a social science where these things should be tangible in education and all this stuff, but it seems a lot of people have like you said, that they have other reasons to not care for what happens really in the economy. But if we show them that they should have a care, like for instance taxation, what could you do with that money rather than bombing children?
Right, and most people would probably find much better uses for that money than bombing children.
It's like aggregate demand would go up.
Yeah, I wouldn't put it in those terms, but because that's not really the point.
But I mean, like, yeah, I don't know. I find it's very saddening when you see like libertarians kind of lose hope, because then they're just gonna almost give in to the beast, as you called it, right?
Yeah, I think so. But I mean, I can see why you would lose hope too. I mean, if you get involved in politics and you really try to change things from within and you try to get elected and all this stuff, well, it corrupts your heart and soul, and you can't get anywhere. I mean, you have to be one of the insiders to get there. So you have to be just like them to get invited. And otherwise, you're not going to make a dent in the system at all. And then you're just going to become depressed and cynical. And there's so many better things you can do. I mean, you can just get a regular job and have a family. That would be so much more productive and so much healthier.
Yeah, completely. Anybody else? Alex, Craig. Well. On that note, we have kept you for an hour and a half almost. I'm glad to have you, and I'm glad we could talk about your primer, agorism, and especially entrepreneurial theory and your like theory of the firm. It's been wonderful to talk to you.
Well, it was fun talking to you too.
Yeah, it
Good
was great
chat.
having you on. I'll send you the link to the stream after we're done this.
Okay.
Perfect,
but
thanks.
Yeah. I hope you have a good day, Professor Bylund. Yeah. I mean, I think I'm out of questions at least. So.
On that note, should we wrap it up then?
Yeah.
All right, thanks everyone for watching. This was a great discussion with Dr. Per Bylund. He's a great economist, a great man, and it was great.
And the primer's in great hands.
Yeah. All right, thanks for coming, and we'll see you later.
Thank you for being on, and I mean, like on Twitter at least. Thank you for being on Twitter. I know I don't want to deal with those people, so.
Oh, you don't have
But
to since I am, so you can just sit back and watch, enjoy the show.
I'm gonna economize my means.
There you go. Yeah, do something productive instead. I should probably do that.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I know you probably have a bunch of downtime since this whole Corona thing in like universities.
Yeah, teaching has not been what it used to be, but
yeah.
Research is really the main job of most professors at big universities. So that doesn't stop, unfortunately.
Well, anyway, I'm gonna head out. Thank you for being here. It was great talking to you, and everybody else. Good night.